Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Jason Buffington from Veeam. You will notice that I'm not joined by my normal co-host, Dave Russell. He is taking the week off. JD, before I introduce you, I got to mention, so I am an Aggie. So in general, I find everything orange to be reprehensible, except that lovely orange banner behind you. JD Wallace from Pure Storage, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Jason, it's great to be here. And you know what? I'm really honored that you make an exception for me. I think orange and green look pretty good together, don't you think?
Usually I have to argue that, but this week it's hard to say no. But yeah, and more ways than one. We're going to talk about that over the next hour. While Dave is on vacation, we thought we would take a little bit of a different spin this week. We have JD from Pure with us, and we're going to be talking about doing more than just backing up your data and waiting for bad things to happen. So that's going to be one of the main themes for today. As always, we want to find out where people are joining us from. So I am from Texas. Our producer is from Georgia. Our social media is in Romania. And JD, thank you for representing the great state of Washington this week. So appreciate
Seattle's
that.
Here.
And there you go. Brazil's in the house, nice and early. A big chunk of the world turned green. That is awesome. Please keep piling on with those countries. All right, let's get right into solutions, right? So instead of just talking about theory, JD, you have one of the best descriptors I've seen in a very long time. Let's unpack ransomware. It's on top of mind for almost everybody, and you've got a great way that you unpack what that looks like. Can you kind of share that with the audience to get us started in the conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, no surprise that we would start here, right? This is a conversation that has been top of mind for a lot of us for a while now. And I think in the last year has really just exploded into the conversations that we have. And you know the stats, Jason. You know, there's going to be an attack every 11 seconds, $20 billion in costs this year. So I think it's certainly very reasonable that it's top of mind and top of the conversations that we have. But yeah, we've got, when we talk about ransomware, we're so kind of tuned to think about what happens after the attack and, you know, what are we going to do now that we're in that situation? But, you know, really, we like to phrase the conversation as, you know, what is the anatomy of attack? What's the life cycle? What does it actually look like? And I think a lot of people don't realize how long-lived some of these can be. From, you know, day zero, an attacker gains access, they don't immediately go and deploy some malware, right? They actually spend some time working their way around, trying to learn about your environment. And this is a big industry. These folks are getting smart. So what are they doing now? They're starting to go after your backups and starting to go after your storage and what else in the environment can they attack. And so, you know, they spend some time kind of working their way around to eventually they decide it's time to deploy their malware. And then you know about it. Now we start to think about how long is it going to take us to detect that and to recover from that. So trying to think holistically about, you know, what's actually happening during one of these attacks.
So I think one of the things that's most important for folks to understand when they look at this slide is understand that on almost every other kind of data protection scenario, we measure the success or the failure in data protection based on how quick can I get up and running with what I had just a few seconds ago, right? So the old adage of RPO and RTO, with RPO being the recovery point, how little data can I do? So instead of nightly backups, could I do a replica that's 10 minutes old? Could I do a snapshot that's 30 seconds old? You're trying to reduce that data loss. Here's the punchline. That is exactly not the copy you want to restore. When it comes to a ransomware attack, you want a little bit of space in there so that you have a chance to actually revert to before the attack actually begins. And that's something I think is really clean on this particular slide. What are your thoughts on that, my friend?
Yeah, absolutely. And not only do you want a little bit of time, but you want the runway to maybe actually be able to test a couple of different scenarios. Was this the one that I wanted, or do I actually want to go try again and go one backup back? And if it's taking you, you know, days just to get one of those iterations restored, you don't have that luxury. And so, you know, being able to kind of iterate through there is really valuable.
Now, that brings up a really good point, right? So if it takes you 2 days to do a data set of restores, and then you find out, nope, not a good one, let's do that again. Another 2 days, right? And oh, by the way, that's if your restores are successful each time. So we're going to unpack We're going to change our math up. Normally for folks watching, you know that we try to stay vendor neutral and really just around thought leadership and architecture for the first 20 minutes or so. Having a guest host on from Pure, we really want to kind of get into solution elements a little bit faster. But before we do, let's check out the map. Because folks have been piling on, we've gotten a couple wows. JD, I'm pretty sure your mom's watching because like our following
Hi, Mom.
up quite a bit this week. Mark, you want to go to the map and we can take a look at those first cities?
Look at all that green.
I love it when Canada comes in at the beginning of the hour. It just turns such a big chunk of the map green. So thank you to the Canadians who are on. Let's see. It looks like Montana, just south of that border, is also representing, which is awesome. We've got some California in the house, and the states keep representing. So that's fantastic. How are we over in the old country? Over in Europe, what do we got? So UK's in the house. I see Norway, Sweden. So Northern Europe is in. France is in. Already did a shout out to Romania. Is that Brazil? Always appreciative for that. And then it looks like we also have, let's see, we got Iraq is in, Egypt is in. Hey, it turns out the boat got freed too. So yay for that. Kenya's in the house, South Africa. Fantastic. Montreal as well. So yeah, please keep the shouts coming. For that, India, you can always count on them. They wake up so early to join this webcast. So thank you all for joining for the call.
And Jason, you didn't warn me this was going to be a geography quiz. You took all the labels off, and so now I kind of feel put on the spot here.
Well, and I got to tell you, the education system in the state of Texas did not equip me for some of the country identification. So I have had to learn some of those in my adult years in order to represent correctly. But all right, let's get back into it. So before the map check, we talked about what does the anatomy of ransomware look like, and of course our friend Rick Vanover, you know Rick as well. He spends a lot of time preaching on that. JD, walk us through what's the Pure plus Veeam answer. Let's get right into how to make the world better.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so once you kind of understand that anatomy of the attack, and I do want to give credit to my colleague, Andrew Miller, who really kind of pioneered this slide and this story. So thanks, Andrew, for your great work there. But, you know, once we understand what this workflow looks like, it can really allow us to start honing in on the different pieces that we need to be responsible for. And I kind of break it up into three. Before the attack, you know, making sure that we focus on, first of all, simplicity, but also preparation and monitoring, right? So if you have a solution that's really complicated to implement, first of all, can you ever really be confident that you implemented it properly? And second of all, you know, we're not just waiting around for something to happen. We want to actually be monitoring our environment, making sure that we know what's going on. We have that situational awareness. So there's a lot we can do before an attack ever happens to make sure that we're really prepared. And then as we move on during the attack, you know, at that point, you've been compromised. And I think we really know it's not if, but when. So, you know, preparation is key here. But, you know, during the attack, I said the attackers are getting smarter. They're learning to go after our backups. They're learning to go after our storage. So having a solution in place that can make sure that you have a core backup that's going to survive that process, so that when we get to the third phase, which is after the attack, and we're really thinking about how quickly can we restore, we know we've got backups that are there and that, you know, we're going to be able to trust to be able to bring our data set back online. And so from a product perspective, you know, really excited to see that Veeam, you know, very well known for backup and recovery, but Veeam 1 is also a really critical part of that. And we love to see the monitoring that's gone into that, the alerting that's gone in, so that we can actually, you know, be notified when we're seeing some of this kind of activity, right?
Yeah, you know, and in fact, we could take this further. And if I had the whole hour just for ransomware, we could talk about actually integrating in malware detection technologies and ransomware detection actually as part of the backup process after you've ingested. We'll talk about more of that in a little bit. But this I love how it kind of walks through the better together aspects. There's some green, there's some orange, there's some green plus orange. Looks a little Christmassy, but I think we're going to go with it anyway. But all right, so that's scenario one, talking about ransomware, but it doesn't stop there, right? So when we talk about data protection and better together, it's important to remember that as cost effective as Pure and Veeam are, your data protection infrastructure is fairly expensive if the only thing you do with it is put your data in a glass box and wait for bad things to happen. Good news is bad things will happen, right? You will get ROI out of what you paid for. But the better news is you can do more with that data than just waiting for bad things to happen. So let's talk about some of the other scenarios that kind of unpack for this. And I think you've got a scenario we talk about during that fast restore. We also have the options of secure restore as well. What else can you do to proactively mitigate along that way? You've got the immutable storage, and you should talk about safe mode for a second because that's kind of cool. We'll talk about immutability, but then take that into secure restore. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, when you think about immutability, I mean, that's a word that gets thrown around a lot in our industry. And so I think it's worth taking just a second to dive into what that really means for the Veeam and Pure relationship. And to us, certainly things like, snapshots and things like Veeam backup files are immutable by nature, right? You can't change them. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't delete them. And so the key piece that this alliance brings together is making sure that not only can you not change those backup files and that they are pristine images of what you intended to protect, but also that you can't delete them. Not only from a protocol perspective, I can't delete it over the share or over the SAN, but also from an administrative credentials perspective. Even if I had a script laying around that, had an administrative password in it that the attacker got a hold of, they can't use that to then go and delete my backups. And so that's a really key part in protecting that from those kind of attacks. But as we move into speed, the key part of that is actually restoring your backups, right? The most basic function is I have to get back up and running fast enough that my business survives that outage. Sure. But to your point, Jason, there's a lot of things that we can layer on top to add additional value. We talked just a second ago about how, it may take us a little while to figure out exactly which one of those backups are the ones we want to restore, right? And there may be some latent malware on that. Well, when you have additional performance at your disposal, you can do things like check that backup for that malware. Go ahead. We've got newer definitions, hopefully by now. Let's go ahead and scrub that and make sure that we're restoring a really clean image back to production, right? So getting some additional value through having that performance capability.
So this is actually also a great opportunity for service providers and our partner networks, because one of the things that we often see is that, especially for small and mid-sized organizations, they may be using, forgive me, some kind of a mediocre type of antivirus or malware detection software. And then the service provider can actually use their own detection mechanisms and actually check, so that you're checking one way and your service provider who's responsible for your backups is actually checking a different way. It's another way to add incremental value to make sure that data is actually clean. And now then the other part of that, JD, that you mentioned is, let's make sure that you have a copy of that data, that you're not reintroducing those infections back into the production environment. We have a copy called Secure Restore that does that, but that really is predicated on, do you have enough juice? Right? Do you have enough oomph in that secondary storage to be able to bring that stuff up, to be able to actually confirm that data? You've actually got an architecture slide around Secure Restore and how that does mitigate against reinfection. Can you unpack that as well? And Mark, I think that's in our deck as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on something that I think is really key here, which is, whether it's an inferior antivirus software or just a different one, we talk a lot.
Yep.
Yeah, we talk a lot about defense in depth, right? It's not enough to just have one layer of defense, but we actually need multiple layers of defense. And the more barriers that we can put up, the more protection we can put up, the more secure we can be in knowing that we're going to be able to recover. And so just having the ability to do a different antivirus scan, I think, is important. But yeah, this has been Secure Restore has been a really powerful tool in being able to deliver on that. Think back to our original slide where we talked about the timeline. It could be many, many days or weeks from the time an initial attack starts to when that payload is deployed. And over that time, we learn new things, we get new virus definitions. There could be malware that, made its way into your backups in the early part of that timeline that, haven't been deployed. And so, you don't have encrypted backups, but you do have a little bit of an infection. And so by the time we get to the point where we're starting to recover, we need to go find that and prevent reintroduction of that malware. Again, our data's fine. It's not been encrypted, but we have some things there that we need to go and clean off of that. And secure restore powered by, really capable storage, high performance storage is what's able to do that.
So now let's take that a little bit bigger. We talked about ransomware for the first half of the hour. Let's talk about the other things that you can also do. And again, I'm admittedly kind of a Pure fan when it comes to this because of the fact that all that incremental value that you're unlocking, almost all of it is because you've got this really powerful secondary storage. I've been in data protection for 31 years now, give or take. And it used to be that the storage that you would use for your backups, once it was disk-based after tape, the storage that you would use for backups was the storage that was no longer suitable for production, right? So if this is the old storage, you would have been throwing it away or maybe putting it in a desktop. This is old disk. And if the only thing you want is put your data in a box and wait for bad things to happen, you could still use mediocre aging disk, which is now out of warranty, and there's a problem with that. But anyway, beyond that, the idea of if you actually put performance storage into your data protection solution, you start to unlock some really interesting data reuse, secondary storage type scenarios. And certainly that is gospel, according to Pure. Can you walk us through some of the areas where Pure has partnered with Veeam on these secondary storage scenarios?
Yeah, absolutely. When we think about secondary storage, it's often about doing more, but I like to just start with expecting more, right? So, and look, Veeam is no stranger to this. A decade ago, you pioneered instant VM recovery and brought that to our industry and have continued to innovate, in V11, instant NAS recovery, instant database recovery, lots of new ways that we can take that technology and deliver even more value on top of it. And that's key, just expecting more from the solutions that we have. All of these involve streaming data directly from your backup files, from your backup storage. And to your point, it's shifted the way we think about backup storage. We used to think about backup storage very much in an ingest optimized frame of mind, right? How short can I make my backup windows? How quickly can I make this weekly annoyance go away so that I can get on with my production? And we've really changed that mindset a lot. And frankly, ransomware has been a big part of that and the volumes of data that it can potentially implicate in a recovery. But we've really started to think much more about how quickly can I recover. So it's no longer a backup conversation, it's a recovery conversation. And that starts to drive these additional use cases. Well, if I have the performance to recover quickly, do I also have the performance then to, we talked about scanning for latent threats, but maybe go ahead and make another copy of that data set for a test dev environment that doesn't impact production anyways. So you can really start to get creative here in some of the scenarios that you can think of for what can I do with this data set once I unlock it from a performance perspective and being able to do new things.
Now, for the folks at home who have not played with this yet, let's talk about this in a good, better, best kind of scenario. As JD mentioned, a dozen years or so ago, Veeam came up with a feature called Sure Backup. And it was partnered around instant VM recovery. Basically, the idea was because of the way that Veeam stores the data, it's stored in more of an image type format such that if you want to, you can spin it up directly from the secondary storage. You don't have to restore the data before you can start to recover the server or the VM or what have you. And the reason we did that was actually mostly to confirm you really did have backupable stuff. Right? Because historically, and I won't pick on the other vendors in the space, but in the old days of backup, the way that you said, yes, we have a good backup is because the backup log didn't report any errors. right? The tape drive didn't report a crap out. The VSS driver didn't say that it abandoned or had a memory error. There were no errors reported, so therefore surely the backup must be good, right? And so that's what we had for a long time, and we figured out very early on, just because your backup software did not give you any errors does not mean that you have restorable data. And so what we said was, okay, so we know it's in an image. We can power it up whenever we want. Let's wrap a sandbox around that, put some new some networking around it so you're not reinstalling the same server twice in the same environment, right? And then you can play with it. You can do a SQL query. You can do a MAPI call. You can do an if file exists. You can do an LDAP query. You can find out, did you actually have restorable data? And that is the Sure backup feature. That is the Sure replica feature. And then so we bring up the sandbox every night, and we bring up those VMs and let you play with them for a few minutes, make sure everything's good, and then turn it off. Well, we had customers saying, hey, instead of just scrapping that overnight, super glad we have good restorable copies, could you leave it in an environment where we could play with it a little bit? And all of a sudden now we have these secondary use case scenarios, but it's all based on us being able to stand that up in a sandbox and play with it. And then the only question becomes, okay, depending on how fast and how performant your secondary storage is and how well integrated your secondary storage can be to the rest of your production environment, all of a sudden, all these really creative scenarios get unlocked. And that's what we're talking about here on this slide.
And back just to your backup verification process, no longer do you have to depend on, well, it seemed to back up okay, all the checks passed. Now you can actually go and test your application in that sandbox and get a real, like, yeah, I could restore it. I ran your application, it worked, right? And that's that builds a lot more confidence when you're trying to sleep at night knowing that your backups are actually recoverable.
Absolutely. All right, so we're kind of coming close to the bottom of the hour. We've talked about some of these advanced scenarios. You can't have an IT modernization conversation, JD, in 2021 without talking about the cloud. Everything is moving to the cloud. In fact, by the end of the year, we expect that all data centers will have been completely shut down. There'll be a whole bunch of new real estate, no more servers, no more racks, cats and dogs. I mean, is that really the future?
Pure mayhem.
What are you seeing, my friend?
Well, let me turn it back on you, Jason. Do you think tape's dead?
If only Dave Russell was here to see that comment. No, tape is not dead.
So, no, maybe not. Of course not. But I think you would agree that its use case is certainly evolving, right? It's not primary backup storage anymore, but it's absolutely part of the 3-2-1 scenario that we all describe. And I think modern data centers are in the exact same space. Like, they are evolving, right? So you have, newer types of workloads, functional, elastic, based on public services that work really well in that kind of cloud-based scenario. But then you still see that storage can be very expensive there for a lot of scenarios as well. And actually at Pure, we've got a great story that we tell. It's our own story. We built our first suite of support tools, Pure One, 100% in the cloud. And over time, as we grew and grew, we saw those costs start to overrun and become unmanageable. And storage was the biggest part of that. So, we optimized. We built a lot of value in the cloud, and we wanted to continue to leverage that. But it came down to using the best tool for the job. And so I think, no, the modern data center is not dead, but it does give us a lot of powerful tools when it comes to choice and flexibility. And your job, Jason, and mine is to understand how, when we're building solutions, we're using the right tools for the job. And we're making those recommendations to our customers to bring all of the portfolio of capabilities together to really design a service that's gonna meet their needs, right?
Yep, totally agree with this. So you're right. The data center is not dead. Tape is not dead. There's a few things in our industry that can still start a good amount of adrenaline and a little bit of feistiness. Those are some of the few ones. The other one, of course, is that snapshots replace backups or vice versa. And that one's always fun to kind of pick on as well. None of which actually apply, right? So this is absolutely better together across the way. And you're right. There's a lot of servers that are still going to live in data centers for all the right reasons, because you need performant access to that close to where the users live. And that is simply going to evolve over time. So super excited about what you're talking about there. So we've got about 5 minutes left. want to continue to encourage folks to chime in on the LinkedIn thread. We'd like to know where you're from. Even after on demand, we will continue to reply to folks even after the fact. So please feel free to do that. JD, you have talked in the grand picture about some of the scenario specific stuff, but as our guest, I will give you, say, 60 seconds. Talk about that whole Pure Veeam better together solution stack for just a few seconds for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And Pure and Veeam have been partners for a very long time. And it's really focused, initially on those backup scenarios using, flash arrays, your primary storage for your VMware data stores, and how are we going to integrate to be able to allow you to back up faster. But we've really evolved that conversation. And that's all still very true, of course, but we've really evolved that conversation. This started initially with FlashBlade and Rapid Restore, really responding to these ransomware scenarios. We've continued to evolve that relationship. We've got some newer products, FlashArray-C, now capacity optimized all flash storage based on some new tools that we have in the industry called QLC Flash, which is really cost-effective capacity optimized flash. And that's what's unlocked this use case. And, it helps us achieve all the things that we've talked about today, being able to recover really quickly, being able to power a lot of those advanced features that Veeam brings to the table, and being able to remediate against ransomware with those enhanced features that we deliver around safe mode and around immutability, but immutability plus immutability with that deletion protection. And so it's been a great alliance, and it's only getting better with some of the new solutions that we've started partnering on.
Fantastic. You have been just an absolutely great partner over at Pure. You have made me totally forgive the color orange. So
I appreciate that.
I would love to say that orange is the new green or green is the new orange, or I'm not sure. I think I probably just bludgeoned that. But anyway, look, for the folks at home, if this is some intriguing scenarios, if you really want to see what happens when you can unlock the power of secondary storage to really make data protection even more robust, JD, you've got a webinar coming up. Let's go ahead and give a quick plug for that. Now, you for some reason chose not to use me for that one, but Zane's pretty good too, so I guess that's all right.
You're so busy. I would love to get you locked into a webinar someday. But yeah, I'm actually partnered with one of your senior engineers, Zane Allen, good friend of mine. We're going to take this subject that we touched on today, and we're going to deep dive. We're going to have a couple of slides, but then we're going to go into demo mode, and we're actually going to show you how this works. We're going to simulate an attack and show you how to recover from it using the tools and the solutions that Veeam and Pure built together.
April 15th, I'm used to thinking of that as tax day. And this might be the one bright spot on what's otherwise a woeful day, at least for us over in the U.S. One of the other things we want to promote is World Backup Day. So what do we got? So on March 31st, there's a lot of swag. We are doing our next LinkedIn Live. In fact, as a friendly reminder, we've got the World Backup Day coming up on Wednesday. We will not be doing live streams on Friday, recognized by many as Good Friday, or the following Monday, day after Easter. So we'll be doing World Backup Day on the 31st. Please make sure to register for that event. I think every Veeamer I know, and probably a few Pure folks as well, will be blogging and tweeting and just helping the world make backups better. So please make sure to register for that. Other than that, just want to thank the folks at home. JD, last thoughts. If you had 30 seconds to talk to an IT pro, what's the last words that you want to leave them with?
Well, just always be learning more. There's a lot of great material out there. We've got a new solution brief that you can download. Come check out our technical deep dive on April 15th. And Jason, it's been really a privilege today. Thanks for allowing me to join, and tell Dave that I'm sorry I missed him, and tell him hi, and thanks for the opportunity.
This has worked out so well. Maybe Dave could take off more time. I mean, you could just, start coming more often, but that's probably not true. So in 2 weeks, Dave and I will be back together again and doing our normal spiel. Up until then, on behalf of Pure and Veeam, thank you for watching. Have a great week.